Hey everybody, Tim here, and I am back for a slightly delayed What I Read in May reading wrap-up. I was like, what month is it? I have 9 books to review with you today, and I'm cooking my lunch for tomorrow. I'm eating my dinner today, kind of multitasking. So we're gonna ease on through these things. For the month of May, I decided to read books by authors that I knew I enjoyed, because I've been trying a lot of new things, but I'd also been acquiring a bunch of backlist works from authors that I enjoyed, and so I kind of wanted to make a dent in that pile. So the first book of the month that I read was My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. This book just came out in 2026. It's a thriller. It was pretty buzzy a few months ago, and pretty much right when it came out, and people have been talking about it and really enjoying it, and so I was excited to give it a go. I had read one other book by Alice Feeney, which was Rock, Paper, Scissors. I also have Tucker with me. Hello, young man. What are you doing? So pardon the state of my bed. Tucker, what are you doing? Go up to the bed. Go up to the bed. Here, Tucker. Tucker, up here. There we go. Lay down. Lay down. Chill out. Lay down. We'll see how that goes. He'll probably just come and go. I had read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney several years ago and really enjoyed it. And so when this came out and it was kind of the talk of the town, I wanted to give it a go. I gave this book 3.5 stars. The premise of the story is that a woman is out for a run, and when she gets home, she doesn't have her keys or a cell phone on her, and the door is locked, so she has to knock to get back in. And a woman who looks kind of like her opens the door and asks how she can help her. And the main character is like, "This is my house." And the woman says, "No. This is my husband. This is my home. Who are you? What are you doing here?" And so it kind of unravels from then. We meet some other characters. And I will say that as I was reading, it filled me with questions start to finish. And I was very captivated right up to the very last page. So I did enjoy the read. Alice Feeney is really great at surprises and twists and turns. And it was a fun read for sure. But there were a few moments that felt a little hard for me to suspend disbelief for. Particularly, there was a scene where it's multi-POV, so you're in the point of view of one of the characters, and they are kind of thinking aloud to themselves. Well, it's not really aloud, I guess. They're thinking to themselves, and you are privy to that information as the reader. But the things they were thinking when you get to the end of the book, it's kind of like, why did they think that? It felt like it was kind of shoehorned in so that you would prevent the reader from predicting the twist. So I didn't really like that. It felt kind of like the book was lying to me just to pull one over on me, and I think that it would be better if the book didn't have to do that. So I still really enjoyed it though, so I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book that I read was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. This is a 2022 thriller. Other books that I've read by Ruth Ware are, let's see if I can do this from memory. One by One and One Perfect Couple I read a few months ago, and I knew that I really enjoyed her. So I have several of her books to get through. So I've been wanting to dig into some more of her books, and this one was right on top of the stack. I gave it 4 stars. I remember the spirit of what this is about, but I'm just going to read a bit of the blurb because it has been like 2 months since I read it. So let's see here. April was the first person Hannah met at Oxford. Vivacious, bright, occasionally vicious, and the ultimate it girl. She quickly pulled Hannah into her dazzling orbit. Together they cultivated a group of devoted and inseparable friends. During their first term, by the end of the year, April was dead. This kind of has dual timelines. You are seeing what's happening at the time that the students are all together at Oxford, and then it's several years later, maybe it's like 10 years or something, I don't quite remember, but you're following the point of view of Hannah, and slowly kind of trying to figure out what happened to April, who killed her. And so I enjoyed this book a lot. It felt like it was kind of a slog to get through, though. At times, it just was a little bit disjointed, but I still kind of powered through and enjoyed it. There was one point in the book that a character was kind of behaving very suspiciously and kind kind of made it seem like, well, obviously that character is the guilty one, because why else would they do this? And then it was never really resolved, and I kind of felt like that was shoehorned in just to kind of, make the story happen. And so I didn't really like that very much. It kind of annoyed me, and that probably brought it down from a 4.5 to just a 4, which was still a great score. I really did enjoy reading the book. It kept me guessing to the end, and I'm excited to read more by Ruth Ware. The next book that I read was Apples Never Fall by Liane Moriarty, and I adore Liane. She is an auto-buy author for me. I've read several of her books, Big Little Lies, My Husband's Secret, or The Husband's Secret, Hypnotist Love Story, 9 Perfect Strangers, and so there are still a few that I haven't read from her backlist, so I have been collecting those when I'm thrifting, and I was excited to pick up this guy. So this book is from 2021. It is billed as a domestic suspense. I don't even know that I would say that. I would kind of call it a domestic fiction book. In fact, I'm just going to read my review from Goodreads because I think I kind of put it succinctly, and why reinvent the wheel. All right, 4.5 stars. I'm a big-time Moriarty fan. She's an auto-buy author for me. I was a tad nervous going into this one, however, because her last book I read was 9 Perfect Strangers, and I found that one disappointing. That's true. I was really disappointed in that book, but it was like one blip on the radar. I love everything else she writes. My faith has been restored because I quite enjoyed this read. It's definitely not a thriller or really even a suspense, so if you read this with those expectations, you won't have a great time. Instead, it's a character-driven domestic fiction novel. So it's about, I should probably tell you, it's about a family. There's a couple, and then they have 4 adult children, and it's just kind of about their relationships, and something happened a long time ago, so we're slowly getting that unveiled to us. And then there's a character who kind of comes into their lives. I don't really want to say much because I don't want to give any spoilers. This is one that I think is really good just to go in completely blind and just read the story. Like, it's not a thriller, it's not super suspenseful, so I don't want to really tell you anything about it so that you can just be surprised and hopefully enjoy the read. I enjoyed the family dynamics and getting to know each of these characters. I felt things were woven together beautifully and tied up nicely at the end. This could have been 5 stars, but it felt too long. At numerous points I thought, this can end now, and then when I got to the end I understood why it kept going, but I felt like we could have still gotten there faster. That being said, lots of things that were mentioned casually early on came back during the wrap-up, so maybe it needed to be as long as it was so that those details didn't feel forced or rushed or obvious. Again, this isn't a thriller. Regardless, I had a good time with this one, and it kept me intrigued. So yeah, I really enjoyed that book, and it would have been a 5-star, except it just felt a little long. But at the end, I really savored the details. I also was kind of kept guessing to the end, so I had a good read. The next book that I read was A Stranger is Watching by Mary Higgins Clark. So I have been on a bit of a Mary Higgins kick this year. I have been acquiring as many books as I can from her backlist, and I'm reading them in release order. So far the first one I read was We'll Meet Again, which is somewhere in the middle, but I liked it and was like, let's start at the beginning. So I've read Where Are the Children Now, and so I just really like her. She's an easy read. I probably don't really need to introduce you to Mary Higgins Clark, but this book came out in 1977, and it is a suspense novel. I gave this book 3 stars. I said Where Are the Children Now, but that's actually her newer book, which is a sequel to Where Are the Children, so I have read Where Are the Children, and I'm going to read Where Are the Children Now. But today we are talking about A Stranger is Watching. So I'll just read you the blurb from the back of the book. Ronald Thompson knows he never killed Nina Peterson, yet in 2 days the state of Connecticut will take his life, having found him guilty via due process of law. But Thompson's death will not stop the pain and anger of Nina's husband, Steve. Thompson's death will not still the fears of Nina's 6-year-old son, Neil, witness to his mother's brutal slaying. Not even the love and friendship of Sharon Martin, a journalist who is slowly becoming a part of their world, will ever ease their bitter memories. Only time, perhaps, will heal their wounds. But in the shadows, a stranger waits, a cunning psychopath who has killed before, who has unfinished business at the Peterson home. So yeah, this one is definitely a suspense. It's fast-paced. I mean, it's a quick read. Let me see what I said about it. Okay, so yeah, this one is a fast-paced ride. I couldn't put it down, so it definitely held my interest. One thing about the writing style of this book, though, is that the narration kind of jumped between character and character, so we'd be watching a character watch the news, and we'd be getting insight into what that character is thinking. But then all of a sudden, the narrator's telling us what the people on the TV are thinking, and it was a little bit disorienting, and that kind of happened throughout the book. So you had to kind of stop and be like, wait, who are we talking about? Oh, we switched to this character, okay. And it just felt a little weird, because I'm used to nowadays, the contemporary approach is to just give characters their own chapter. So you kind of know who you're following, but the 70s was a different time. So, you know, I can't fault it too bad. Like I said, it definitely was fast-paced. It held my interest. I enjoyed it. For me, a 3-star is kind of like, it was a book. Like, I didn't hate it or really take any huge issues with it. 2.5 or lower would be something that was disappointing. Nothing really disappointed me. It just was a little choppy to get through sometimes, but I didn't love it either. I liked it well enough. I'm glad I read it. I want to read more, so that's kind of a 3-star for me. It was a book. Next on my list is Mad Mabel by Sally Hepworth. This book just came out this year as well, 2026, and it is a mystery. The only other Sally Hepworth book that I've read was The Good Sister when I did my April reads with all good titles, and I loved that book. I gave it 5 stars, and so I've kind of been itching to get some more Sally, and this is a book that Janelle gave me, and so it's a book of the month, and it's new, and so I thought, hey, you know what? I'm a new Sally fan. Let's give it a go, and this book was also 5 stars. I just could not get enough of it. I loved it so much. So this is basically following an 81-year-old woman named Elsie Mabel Fitzpatrick. And she goes by Elsie now. She's in her 80s in this nice little quiet cul-de-sac. But she has a past. She is known as Mad Mabel, where she comes from, because of a series of mysterious goings-on and a couple of deaths in her past, and she was always around, and so she's got some secrets, and they're starting to come and turn up in her day-to-day life now. So this is definitely dual timeline as well. We see the current present day with Elsie, and something is happening in her orbit, and because of that, things in her past are starting to come up as well. And then the other timeline would be the past. We're seeing what really happened in her youth as she grows up. And so this is just a beautiful book. I loved it. I love the character of Mabel, or Elsie. She is just a spitfire. She's great. I love that I had so many questions as I was reading the book, and they all were satisfactorily tied up. And it was a nice ending. So definitely a beautiful read that I would recommend. Next up is Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. Other books I've read by Karen, I read The Cousins by her, but that was after I read and loved the One of Us is Lying series. That's a trilogy of books that I adored. So I felt like, you know what, let's give Karen another shot here. I really like her. This is a YA story. It follows a pair of twins who move back to their mother's hometown to live with their grandmother, and they start to hear about mysterious family secrets that happened when her mother was a teenager, and it seems like there's a lot of secrets to be uncovered. And then there's a murder in town, and we're very quickly kind of thrust into the action of that. So as I said, this is a YA thriller. It came out in 2019, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. So I would say that of the 5 books that I've read by Karen now, this is my least favorite. But with 3.5 stars, that's still a great rating as far as I'm concerned. Just compared to her other works, I thought it was the lowest of the bunch. There were times that this one felt kind of cheesy even for YA, so I kind of had to roll my eyes and keep going. Not terrible, it's fine, but I Also kind of thought there was a lot of characters and there was dual POV, and so we had to keep track again of not only all of the characters, but how their relationships with each other changed whenever you changed perspectives. And that is a critique I gave in the One of Us is Lying trilogy as well. It's just that by the third book, I had a pretty clear handle on who was who and what their relationships were. So I had 3 books to figure it out. But with this one, 1 book, 1 shot to try to keep everything organized in your head. And it was fine. I enjoyed it okay. What else did I say? Oh, I was going to give it a 3-star. It's a book, except I loved the last line. And so I threw him an extra 0.5, made it a 3.5. So if you want to know what that last line was, you'll have to read it yourself. Next up is Lisa Jewell's Don't Let Him In. This is a domestic thriller that is also pretty new. It came out in 2025. And so other books by Lisa that I have enjoyed reading, I didn't really prepare for this. What else have I read by her? I know I've read several books by Lisa Jewell, but let me just look real quick. Okay, so in recent memory, I've read 2 books by Lisa Jewell. None of This Is True, and Then She Was Gone. And I may have read 1 or 2 others, but I know I have several of hers on my shelves to get to. But I thought, you know what, let's read a new one before it gets spoiled for me. So I picked this guy up. This one was 4 stars. So I'll just read you a little bit about the back of the book. You know my vibe. I like to go in completely blind, no spoilers. So I'll just tell you a little bit to give you a hint of what the story is. He's the perfect man. It's a perfect lie. So Nina is intrigued when she receives a condolence card from Nick, an old friend of her late husband, who is looking to connect after her husband's unexpected death. Nick is a man of substance and good taste. He has a smile that can melt the coldest heart and a knack for putting others at ease. But to Nina's adult daughter, Ash, Nick seems too good, too slick, too polished to be true. When Ash begins digging into Nick's past, she finds a trail of unsettling coincidences. And there's more, but I'm not going to say any more than that. So this one I really enjoyed. I went in totally blind. I don't even think I read the back of the book, honestly. I just picked it up and started reading. So this is multi-POV, and I want to say multi-timeline because I think we do jump back and forth between the past and present day. We do that, I know. A couple of years at least. So a couple characters that are involved, and you're seeing what they're up to and what's going on. Of course, it's Nick and Nina, Ash. There's some other characters. Definitely just unraveling all of Nick's secrets. And so this one was 4 stars. I really enjoyed it a lot. It kept me on the edge of my seat, and I loved how everything was kind of pieced together at the end. There were definitely some moments that I'm like feeling what the characters are feeling, or there are moments where, like, as an adult child wanting her mother's best interest and feeling like, why isn't my mother doing what I'm telling her to do? Or I know what's best for her, but she's not listening. Was just definitely palpable, and I could feel that. And definitely, the more we learned about these characters and what was in their pasts, it just kept building. And so, yeah, I really, really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. I don't really remember why offhand I didn't give it 5 or even 4.5. It probably, honestly, when I'm reading my review, I don't remember there being any major issue. And even in my review, I said it kept me on the edge of my seat, wondering where it would go and how different things pieced together. The end was satisfying. So I think I'm going to edit this and make it 4.5 stars, because I cannot think of any issue. And now it's been 2 months, so maybe in the time, I just come off reading Mad Mabel, which was 5 stars, and then the YA thriller, which was just a 3.5. So maybe what I was thinking was this didn't blow me away like Mad Mabel, but it was better than the last one I read, so 4 maybe is what I was thinking. But again, I didn't have any issues. Like, I thought the pacing was fine. It kept me interested. The ending was satisfying. So yeah, I'm going to give it 4.5 stars actually. So it has been upgraded, and I've updated my review to reflect that. Because yeah, I'd say it was good. I am excited to read more by Lisa Jewell. All right, we have 2 left. Next up is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is a thriller from 2021. A few months ago, I read The Silent Patient by him, which was a 5-star read for me, and I just loved it. However, I do remember as I was reading The Silent Patient, it was kind of a 3.5 as I'm reading it, but then at the end it just kind of flipped me on its head, or flipped me on my head, and I gave it a 5. Which, in hindsight, maybe it should have been a 4.5, but I don't know. It's all... ratings are a construct, so who cares? But this one I gave 1.5. So this book... I would have DNF'd it, to be honest, except that Alex wrote it, and I was like, I love The Silent Patient, so I have to power through. Maybe something will change. But I was just disappointed. And so, first of all, the cover, not something I would pick up. Like, I picked it up because it was Alex's book, but nothing about this makes me intrigued. I'm not super interested in, like, art history or whatever, and that's kind of what this bust evokes. Yeah, there's a little bit of red blood happening here, I guess, which I'm just now noticing for the first time because it's such a dark cover. So, I mean, it's just, the cover does nothing for me. I would have walked right past this in the store. I found it at Goodwill for like $7. I might have got half off on it, who knows. But it's in good condition, so I was like, okay, I'll spend $7 on this book. So, let's see, I'll tell you a little bit about what it's about. The spellbinding tale of psychological suspense weaving together Greek mythology, murder, and obsession. Edgar Fosca is a murderer. Of this, Mariana is certain. But Fosca is untouchable. A handsome and charismatic Greek tragedy professor at Cambridge University, Fosca is adored by staff and students alike, particularly by the members of a secret society of female students known as the Maidens. And that's kind of as far as I read, because again, I want to go in blind. So I'm like, ooh, a secret society, a college setting, someone that everyone knows is a murderer, but they can't prove it. That sounded very riveting, and I was super intrigued. But this book was rough to get through. Let me read my review. I'll read you my review too, but I wanted to say that as I was reading this, it reminded me a lot of, which one was it? The It Girl, because it was also set in like a college school setting. And so as I was reading this book, it was reminiscent of The It Girl, but I thought The It Girl was better. So that's probably some sort of subconscious, unfair comparison that I was making when I'm like, I've read this book already, and I thought it was done better last time. So take that for what it's worth, but let me read you my review. 1.5, this book was frustrating. The premise was intriguing and a story had potential, but execution was abysmal. It was a slog for me to get through, and on the whole, I found it to be a disjointed mess of needless exposition, way too many indistinguishable characters, and predictable twists. The main character was insufferable and made bad decision after bad decision. A huge pet peeve of mine is when a book's blurb spoils the plot. This one mentions a secret society called the Maidens, which was finally introduced on page 120, and a second death, which was introduced on page 164. So I guess later on in the blurb it must mention that there's 2 deaths. But that second death doesn't happen until 164. These plot points had no business appearing on the inside cover, or they should have happened 100 pages sooner. I wanted to DNF, but forced myself to finish because of the author and how much I loved his debut, but they are night and day. I will say that the big twist at the end got me, and that raised my score from 1 to 1.5. There are some crossover Silent Patient references, but they felt forced in and like we were beaten over the head with them. If this was my first Michaelides book, I would probably not read any more from him, but since I love The Silent Patient, I will eventually try The Fury. So yeah, right now he has 3 books out, and The Fury is the 3rd one, which I do have. I think it's on my Book of the Month shelf down here somewhere. It might be that blue one, or it was probably this one right here that you can't really see. It doesn't matter. But yeah, this one just wasn't it, you guys. Yeah, it drove me crazy that thing is at the back, because I think I went in blind. I read that little when I was in Goodwill, I remember reading the inside cover. And I got as far as mentioning the Maidens. So, you know, I got like this first paragraph in. And it's like, yep, that's enough for me. I don't need to read any more. And so as I'm reading it, first of all, it was weird to me that like a 38-year-old woman was at this college campus trying to solve a murder. Like, it felt like this should be like one of the students trying to do it. So that was a little weird. And by the end of the book, that made sense. But I don't know, it felt weird that a grown woman was at this college campus where she had no business, no connection, no reason to be involved in this case. And again, it was this kind of like page after page where it felt like nothing was happening. And so when I get to that point, I'm like, well, let me read the full blurb, because maybe I came into this expecting something, but that's not what it is. And if that's the case, that's on me. I went in blind. So, maybe I came in expecting a riveting thriller, but then I read the inside cover and it's a romance or something. You know what I mean? So after a few pages of kind of it losing me, I read the whole blurb, and that's where it mentioned again the Maidens, but we don't ever discover them until 120, and then the second murder. And so then I'm just annoyed because I'm reading this book and those things aren't happening yet. And so it's like, oh my gosh. So I just did not like it, and it would have been 1 star, but there was a Michaelides twist, so I was like, you got me. So I do have to give credit where credit is due, but the rest of it was a mess. And the references to the silent patient definitely felt like, hey guys, did you see what I did there? Hey, let me bring it up again just to make sure you notice. And so I didn't like that very much either. I don't know. It just felt really lacking, but I loved the silent patient. So I will definitely be reading The Fury, but it's not super high on my list, so eventually I'll get to it. But that was The Maidens. Okay, the last book that I read in May was Bitterblue by Kristin Cashore, I believe is how you pronounce that. This is the 3rd book in a series. It's the, I just call it the Graceling series. The Graceling Realm, maybe? I'm not quite sure what the series is called, but the books consist of Graceling, which I absolutely adored, Fire, which was good, and then Bitterblue. And so it's a fantasy series, maybe romantasy. I'm not quite sure. There was some romance, but it might just be fantasy that has romance in it. This is 2012 that it came out, so it's a bit older. There are 2 more in the series, so I think there are 5 total, and I have the other 2 to eventually get to. This one got 2.5 stars. Basically, you really do need to read the series in order. This is not a standalone book. But I think that's part of what the problem was, because not much action happened. And this is a big guy here. So, the first 2 had a lot of adventure where the characters were like going on quests and had missions and things. And this one, there was a lot of sitting around and talking, and a lot of other people leaving to go on missions and quests and then coming back and telling us about them. But the main character, Bitterblue, was not in on the action. And I think that is, again, because it's a series, she did go on an adventure in the first book, and then there are 2 more books to come, so maybe this is just like a necessary, like, narration exposition dump that you kind of need in the middle to bridge the different books together. I don't know. I enjoyed reading it. It wasn't a bad book, but like at the end of the day, it felt like nothing really happened, and that was disappointing. And because my rule is that if a book is disappointing, it has to be a 2.5 or less, this one was a 2.5. So I'll tell you a little bit about like the world they live in, and then I'll just read you my review from Goodreads. So the Graceling Realm is a world where some people are born with a grace, and a grace is like a special gift or a skill. So maybe you can run really fast, or maybe you never need to sleep, or maybe you have the ability to read minds. I mean, the options are limitless, truly. And you never really know who has a grace except for... Well, that's not true. You can always tell who has a grace because they have 2 different colored eyes. They have like calico eyes. So maybe they have 1 green, 1 brown, or 1 gray and 1 blue, or something like that. And so any person that has 2 colored eyes, has a grace. But what you don't know is what that grace is. And so as a result of that, there's a lot of prejudice in the world. People go to certain lengths to disguise that they have a grace, like maybe they wear an eye patch or something. So that's kind of the world we live in. And Bitterblue is a queen in this realm. She does not have a grace, but she was a character in the very first book which followed a Graceling who had a Grace and what her journey was. And so it's neat because all the books are connected because they live in the same world and the characters kind of meet each other and things like that. But I think that because Bitterblue herself didn't have a special gift, but had to kind of live in a world and react to things that happened and things like that, it just, something was missing. So I'll just tell you a little bit about what the inside says here. When Bitterblue became queen at 10 years old, she thought her father's murder meant the end of his violent, sociopathic influence. She was wrong. The intensely anticipated companion to the bestsellers Graceling and Fire is even more rageful, exhilarating, and wistful and romantic. Now 18 and believing her advisors are overprotecting her, Bitterblue begins sneaking outside the castle at night to walk the streets of her own city, disguised and alone, risking her life as well as heart. So, yeah, I guess her adventure is that she kind of sneaks out. She pulls a Jasmine from Aladdin and sneaks out, but that's kind of the extent of that. And so this kind of feels like Aladdin meets Game of Thrones. Again, it was fine. I enjoyed it. I do want to read the rest of the series. I loved the first book, but this one was disappointing. So I'll read you my review. 2.5. This score pains me, but I reserve 2.5 for books that disappoint, and that's what we have here. It started strong, and I was hoping for a 5-star experience, revisiting a world I fell in love with. I liked the main character and some of her early antics, but about halfway through, it became harder to keep invested because there wasn't enough action, and the big plot seemed to revolve around translating books. That's right. She's kind of in a library finding old tombs and reading them. Really? We're reading a book about that? Not riveting. It had been a year or more since I read the previous 2 books, and this installment had so many characters that I couldn't keep them straight. Yeah, that's another thing. This book, because it's a series and not a standalone, you really do need to read the others. But this book mentions a ton of characters who don't even appear, it just references them because I guess the author wanted you to know that they existed at some point. But they had no bearing on this story, and there were so many characters that it was impossible for me to remember who was who from the past and what that meant for what was happening now. The writing is excellent, and there were some great moments, but it was disappointing in terms of character and story development on the whole. I definitely plan to continue the series. So yeah, it was fine. It was probably, it definitely could have been better, but I enjoyed it, and I'm going to keep reading more. So those are the 9 books that I read this month, and I say this month, it's like almost, it's June 29th today. Those are the 9 books I read last month, and I was kind of all over the place. I had a 5-star. I had a few disappointing books. I had a couple that were mid-range. And so it's disappointing that it's disappointing that the month ended on like a 2.5 and a 1.5. Especially in a month where I'm reading books by authors that I enjoyed. So it was a fun experiment though. And I read some great things. And even the Maidens, I'm glad I read it. So I think that wraps up the books that I read in May. For June, I will be filming that one soon because it's the 29th, so hopefully tomorrow or the next day I'll get that going. I'm going on a cruise in July, so I would really like to get both of these videos up before I leave. Let's hope that happens. But in June, it's Pride Month, and so I'm going to be reading books with LGBTQIA plus characters or by authors that are members of the community. So, and that one's, I'll just tell you right now, also kind of all over the place. So I will see you soon with my June reading wrap-up. Thanks for watching.